Standards are an important piece of the equation. I mean, on the one hand, you've got innovation going forward without standards. On the other hand, you've got groups working on open source, which is a form of standards, or at least industry collaboration-based innovation. And then, of course, you have groups like the IEEE creating standards that make it easier for large companies to procure. That's the whole picture. Is you've got big corporations, you've got governments who want to be able to buy this. Hi, I'm David Bernstein here. I am an active volunteer in a number of different cloud computing related projects. I'm here to talk primarily about the IEEE P2302 standard working group, as well as the IEEE Intercloud Testbed effort, which was announced this morning, as well as I've assisted on Project Sienna for the Europeans, so part of the FP7 initiative. And I run a consulting company in Silicon Valley. I'm going to talk specifically about the IEEE effort called 2302, which is a working group, and the upcoming Intercloud Testbed. And my brethren here in Japan, we have been closely collaborating, in fact, stumbling upon this idea, I think probably around the same time several years ago, and having visited each other and trying to figure this out is a great example of this kind of collaboration. But just to get started a little bit from a background perspective, I find this interesting. A few of us were sitting around, including Steve and some others, a few years ago now at this point, thinking about this new thing, cloud computing, that came out, and really trying to dig way back, having a few gray hairs, seeing this sort of big changes in the industry once before in the online community. And even though it really didn't seem that far away from me, it was really hard to find many of these logos. But I'm sure many of you remember your first online experience pre-internet, and that's when internet had a dash in it. Your first experiences online were the walled garden clouds of Prodigy, AOL, CompuServe, and so on. And of course, AOL being the biggest thing since Facebook. I mean, I got that wrong. Anyway, AOL was a huge force in online, and yet you really couldn't see any content from the outside your walled garden. You couldn't send mail to anyone on the different network, and it was how networking was. I like to use the analogy that as video killed the radio star, of course there was an RFC that really killed the AOLs of the world, so to speak, and the Buggles really predicted the death of CompuServe and AOL and so on early on. Really, they didn't really know it, but they were really talking about this RFC from Postal, which really appropriately named. I think it's a little ironic that Postal wrote the RFC on mail delivery, don't you all? But anyway, so SMTP really started to was designed to allow a simple way for various networks to exchange email, and of course with MIME and so on and the infrastructure below, we now had a way for networks to interoperate. And so what we had now is these interoperable server-side protocols and formats which allowed the walled gardens to fall and lose their proprietary value to some extent because the value proposition was larger. And I think if you can see, these handful of simple standards really allowed and caused the internet to become a dominant online communications mechanism, at least from this retail perspective, from from the old days of the proprietary BBS. And I really think that this is these movies sort of repeat or remake, and I think that's where we're at with cloud computing, because we have a kind of a deja vu going on, I believe, now in the dominance of a handful of very large cloud operators who have built these giant computing platforms that don't interoperate. And it's really not a technical issue anymore. It's just an issue of sort of the way the landscape is. So clearly the entropy in our industry is such that the carriers start to get involved. We develop standards, we create interoperability test beds, and so that's exactly the effort that we started to lead, because we thought about this exact same problem at hand, and really there's no such thing as an intercloud at this point, and this just seemed completely wrong. And so, like the GICTF, a crew of folks set out to figure out and write some research papers and present them at various IEEE conferences. And we've done this now. A small team of people, a reasonably small team of people from a few labs, including myself. And this is kind of a tractable problem. That is to create some protocols that will allow these systems in general to interoperate. And of course, they all begin with S because every standard in the internet begins with a simple. So, but as an example for what could solve this type of walled garden approach are simple VM mobility protocol, simple storage replication protocols, and other protocols as needed, which can help clouds interoperate. Now, there's quite a bit more to it, of course. I won't bore you with the details, but it is a compelling idea that has repeated itself in the phone network with GSM and the telephone network in general, and of course in the internet itself, to have this kind of interoperability. So some time ago we launched a working group on the subject within the IEEE called P2302, a standard for intercloud interoperability and federation, with the notion to create specifically not the portability APIs but the interoperability APIs sort of on the back end of clouds. And you can kind of read the areas that we chose to concentrate on. And the architecture was modeled after the internet with the notion of routes, the notion of exchanges, and certificate authorities, and the interoperability both of public and private, very much like the internet works today. So a number of the protocols involved are things you know and love, like SAML and XMPP, but we don't have enough time to go through the detail. But P2302 is a pretty vibrant effort within the IEEE. We've got a great working group rolling. And we've also decided to try to create a testbed that also embodies the interoperability of several clouds between some public clouds and some universities. And so in conjunction with the Industry Connections program within the IEEE, we have gone out and assessed some interest. These are groups that have indicated interest in participating. So throughout this year, we'll be trying to establish the actual connectivity of some of the labs using some of those prototype protocols that are then embodied in the 2302 standard. And so this is a pretty exciting kind of effort. I think it's pretty breakthrough as part of the Cloud Computing Initiative. The IEEE is embarking on this kind of partnership between a standard working group and a real-time test bed. This is very interesting, and we're looking to our friends in Japan and others to really participate fully in this and see how far we can get in really hooking up a fully global intercloud. This takes a lot of liaison, and you can see, and you'll hear throughout the panel today that there's a lot of discussions between the different groups to make sure that we're trying not to duplicate efforts. It's really a secret plan to get a lot of frequent flyer miles, but we don't really kind of admit to that. But anyway, there's a great amount of collaboration around to do this type of effort. So if you're interested in the standard or the test bed, please do get involved. As you know, the IEEE efforts are open to everybody. One engineer, one vote is the mode we're running this in. We have gotten pretty far with a working draft that's published. So that's been a huge body of work. I'm sure it's going to get hacked pretty well. We need some more contributors and engineers to work on the project. So please get involved. It's open for participation. There's the link. And that's when our next general meeting is. We have meetings every couple of months and lots of WebEx in between. So please do get involved with the effort. And of course, just a little bit of humor. Once all these clouds interoperate and self-organize, some folks say the worst will happen, but I don't think that. I think it's a great effort. So hopefully. This is not a scenario we'll see with Apologies to Terminator. But anyway, thanks for your time on this. Here's my contact information, and I look forward to seeing you at the next 2302 working group. Thank you.